briefly, I also run the beat at comicsbeat.com, which is a news site about kind of the inner workings of comics news, comics culture, and so on. So, and Brett is a sometimes, whenever he does, incredibly valued contributor to Comics Beat, as well as...
Yes, and then I also run Graphic Policy, which is another comic blog that covers, obviously, comics, but does a little bit more going into demographics, which is what we're going to talk a lot about, as well as politics and comics and political themes. So, we got a whole bunch of slides for you,
yeah,
so we might as well dive right into it.
We really wanted, when Brett and I started talking, we talked about demographic surveys of comics readership, and the fact that it seems like a very non-diverse audience if you look at the numbers that have been done in the past. And Brett told me that he had some Facebook-based surveys that actually showed a very different demographic. So we got talking about that, and we'll present that in a minute. And I wanted to kind of ease into this though a little bit with some older surveys that have been done. And you know, not to get, I mean, I don't know how many marketing wonks or whatever are here in the room, but you know, it's incredibly important to have demographic info. Especially as you know, to be blunt about it, as we've been getting more female-themed and female-oriented comics, you know, one of the reasons why there hasn't been that much marketing to women in nerd areas is because there wasn't any marketing information that showed that there was a female audience for this kind of material, despite what you might see looking around you. And one of the reasons for that is things like this. Now, this is a survey that was put in, I believe, 1970 as an insert in DC Comics. So it's a beautiful time capsule. Apparently, then DC Comics publisher Carmine Infantino was behind it, and you know, he wanted to find out what the kids were into. And you know, I'm sure you can see there the, you know, what are your interests? You know, pollution, black people, space flights, national problems, city problems, sports, hobbies, romance, or astrology. So, you know, it's a pretty awesome snapshot of what people were interested in 1970. You know, some of the other questions there are, I mean, it is asking about, you know, you like rock, country music, bubblegum music, folk, or soul. Yeah.
Favorite breakfast?
Hot cereal, breakfast, drink, cold cereal, or other. So hot cereal, cold cereal, those were the big issues. So, you know, and let's wrap. So if you want to go to the next slide, this has more, you know, you can win. They gave you like things that you can win here, and then, you know, you buy, what is it? Do you buy things advertised in comics? So, you know, this is what they were trying to do. They were trying to get an idea of, you know, whether they could get some better advertisers to you know, market to this audience that was reading the comics at this point. I have seen, I'm not sure how public the results of this survey were ever made. I wasn't able to find them, but I think there are some anecdotal information on this survey if you dig around. And you know, kind of to the point, I think the level of female readership was under 5%. There were female readers at this point back in the 70s who were interested in pollution and black people, I guess. And, so, you know, it showed 5%. That's a very small percentage, obviously. So if you want to go to the next slide. This, I'm sorry, it's such a crappy looking slide here, but this is a 1995 DC Comics survey. These are the results that were made, published on her blog, Comics Worth Reading by Johanna Draper Carlson, who I really should put a credit to on this slide, but I suck, so I didn't. But again, this is 1995. You can see, like, there was about 1,000 people who did the survey. It was self-selected. It was an insert in the comics. You know, people filled it out, mailed it in. I think, again, there were prizes, you know, perhaps a TV. So we see 92% of the readers are male. So, you know, 8%, 5%, 8%. It's always under 10%. All the surveys of this superhero era I have seen, it was always a female readership under 10%. Now, there are older surveys from the 50s that showed that comics readership was actually 50% female at that point. And, you know, these were magazine BPA audits. These are like official kind of demographic information. So this is not anyone gaming the system in any way. I mean, this is actually the reality of comics publishing in the 50s, was that it was a very diverse audience. But in the superhero self-selecting survey, we see, you know, a very low female participation and readership. So in the next slide, this is from the 2011 New 52 survey that DC did. I've just taken out this one slide just because, so we can, you know, highlight this one demographic. Now this was a very thorough survey that was really based on the New 52 initiative that DC put out to see what kind of people were reading them. They did a huge marketing effort for the New 52, and I must give them credit. I thought it really was one of the best marketing rollouts for any comics initiative ever. And they definitely got a lot of attention for it. So this survey, I think, was really for them to see how that had reached out to new readers, and you know, how effective it was at reaching new readers. So again, you know, we see here, interestingly, you know, they did it through 3 methods: in-store surveys, they did through their email blasts they sent out to people who read digital comics, and then they also did a general online survey. So as you can see in the online survey, we have 23% female readership, and the other 2 are the same kind of 7%, 8% number. Now, interestingly, when DC actually released all these results, they pegged female readership at 7%. They didn't use the larger number. And I'm not sure exactly why that is, but again, I think they were keeping it within that low, that sub 10% threshold. So this is really kind of where all the marketing and demographic info has been for comics previously, about what the gender breakdown was. And again, I mean, it was, you know, you see that 7%, and, you know, obviously now you walk around the show, it's, you know, a lot more diverse than that, and it hasn't been that way for quite a while. So there definitely seemed to be some kind of disconnect here. And then came Brett.
Let's bring up the other survey.
Yes, there we go.
All right, to give you a little background about where I come from, I actually come from the political realm. Anyone else work in politics? Yes, no? No? You're all blessed for not knowing this. All right, so here's the dirty secret of politics. We know everything about you. We have massive databases that isn't just your voting habits, but it's your age, your gender, and with an email address, we're able, you know, maybe an address, street address, we're able to get hundreds of points of data on you. So we know your income, your education level, do you have kids, what you like to spend your money on, what car you drive, and all that drives elections. So going into this all started like 3 years ago with a couple online experts saying how big the audience was. And they claimed that there was probably 300 to 400,000 people. There's no way in hell comics is 400,000 people. When you go to conventions, you check the online sales, you check digital sales, all indicates that it's got to be much bigger. Plus there was also it's all men. Women don't exist. So I just went out and said bullshit. And decided to start mining some data using Facebook. So Facebook, with every like you give, every bout of information you have, is data that I can actually take advantage of and usually deliver advertising to you. So I decided to look at that data. There's 180 million people just in the United States that are on Facebook. There's a hell of a lot of comic fans, it turns out. So the slides are kind of broken down this way. One, I go through the comic data that I've come up with. We look at some convention data. I mean, look at here, it's about, I ran the numbers, 40-something% female is in this room. Some gaming demographics just to kind of back everything up to prove that women exist. And then what are we actually going to do with this, and we'll kind of talk about why it actually matters. So in 2013, I started a state of the comic industry as far as demographics. Every San Diego Comic-Con, I run these numbers and we just compare it year from year. Since last year, there's been some changes, so I'm going to kind of throw it out there so no one calls me out that the data sucks. So Facebook, it's what I run it through. They've updated their system. They're way better than they used to be a year ago. They're returning more data. They're giving even way more information, so there's changes in that. I've gotten better at it. Before I was using like 40 terms, now it's like 160 terms every single month looking at this stuff. So overall, the methods improved doing this. Next is the numbers I'm going to show for DC and Marvel are slightly different. In 2013, I did globally for DC and Marvel, but the global stats kind of suck because some countries are oppressive and don't let women near computers. So I stuck with the US. Now, interesting when it comes to Facebook, in the US, gender-wise, it's almost exactly the same as the actual US population. So the numbers are pretty damn good. Like the US population is like 40 or 52% female, and Facebook's like 53, 54% female. So it's really close. So here's where we were. 2013, there's 176 million people on Facebook. Comics was only 10.6 million. We're gonna get much higher down the road. DC globally was 2.7, Marvel was 12.9, and indie, so like anyone basically not Marvel and DC, was 2 million. Overall, you can kind of see the breakdown that comics generally was just under 40% women. Now skip ahead to 2014, we're at 184 million people on Facebook, so it's grown a good amount. Comics I've gotten up to 24 million. It's been consistent at 24 million for almost a year at this point. So that number has changed barely. Sometimes it's 26 million, depending on what's popular going on. It never has dropped below 24 million. And that seems to be the cap. No matter what terms I throw out there, it just stops at 24 million. DC is now up to 4.4 million, and this is just in the United States. So they've grown significantly compared to the global numbers. And the Marvel's at 11.4. They've dipped a little, but that's US versus global. And indie, I think, has gained a little.
Oh, you know what? Can you go back to that stat
Yeah.
just a little bit? Because I want to point out here again, if you look at the women percentage, which is the far right hand, interestingly, again, like it's in that now we're in the 40 to 50. I mean, all the research that you've done basically shows a number between 40 and 50%, right?
Yes.
Except, interestingly, the DC Comics number is 28%, 29%, which actually jives pretty well with that online number that they had within a few percentage points. So, the data meshes, it actually does mesh up pretty well here.
It meets the narrative that we see going to conventions and talking to people. Marvel, I'll point out, is about 37. Yeah.
Sorry, just have a question. What would be the other? Because you've got comics at 24, and then you've got DC, Marvel, and indie. They don't add up to 24. So what else is included in comics?
Manga.
Okay.
No, it's fine. Manga is my guess.
Thank you.
That is actually a good question. I didn't think of that. All right, so here's the differences. Think about 2013 and 2014 of what Marvel was doing. They were putting out a lot of female-centric books because they've noticed something. And what are the numbers back up here? Marvel has gained 12 percentage points in that year. Interesting enough, the same point that they were pushing female-led books. It's almost as if they saw something in the numbers and the feedback they were getting. DC dropped a little. Indie comics dropped a little, but again, I would say over the year, indie's kind of become more mainstream. I think there's more men checking it out. It's not really as just focused on women. Facebook's changed, obviously, but overall, the comics population, women have gained from the year before. It's up 5 percentage points. So there's a whole bunch of other data that's come out. Eventbrite, which does a lot of the comic conventions, if you go and sign up, you're getting their info. Basically, if I can get your email address, I can get a lot of info on you. They decided to do a survey instead for some reason. They surveyed 2,600 people. So I decided to call them out on it and went to Facebook again. My number was 4 million people, over 4 million people.
So again, when you had 4 million people, though, you were like looking at events.
Yes,
correct?
so this was just events. This is everything from San Diego Comic-Con to Otakon here, Baltimore, Anime USA, anything you can find. And it's also just the US. So Eventbrite came out and said it's conventions, 45 women, 55 men. If you do the math in this room, it's about what it is. Facebook said 58 men, 42 women. Really freaking close. Their age is their breakdown. On the right is what I came up with. Again, somewhat close. There's some deviation in the 18 to 22 is the big thing. But Facebook also skews younger, so the age is where I'm always a little more iffier on everything. So gaming, because why not? Let's look at it. So the Entertainment Software Association does surveys every single year. And what they came out was 52 men, 48 women. Women exist. You're seeing a pattern here. And some pretty consistent numbers. Those were people who play. Obviously, people who buy are a little bit different, but I just wanted to throw out there that's 50-50, but you gotta, parents buy it for their kids and don't actually play. So I decided for Gen Con, which is a convention I go to every year, to do board games. And what do we find there? 55 men, 44 women. Again, really consistent. It's the same number no matter what we look at. Which is telling me something, that all those thoughts that we've had about who reads comics and who plays games and who plays video games is probably not true. That this isn't a male-dominated thing, that women do exist, they do enjoy these things, and they exist, they're out there. So what do we do with this? Generally, we should be expanding the industry. Things are been going well, but they could be going better. There's 24 million people. This 24 million isn't purchasers. These are people who are interested. These are highest likely people who might purchase. Up in the upper right-hand corner is Third Eye Comics. They're a great store. They're actually down on the floor. About 60 miles from where I live. Every single week, multiple times a week, I get advertisements delivered to me from Third Eye Comics saying, like our page. So then they can talk to me more. The one that I like here, that I kind of spotlighting, was during the week of Guardians of the Galaxy. For the week leading up to the movie, the week afterwards, it was, do you like Guardians of the Galaxy? Come check out our store. And now that the movie's over, they've gone back to other things. When it was Thor, do you like Thor? Check out our store. When it was Superman, do you like Superman? Check out our store. They are really good at this, and clearly they're targeting people within around 60 miles of where their stores are. What else can we do? One, actually understand who's reading comics. DC in their survey, they went and did an email blast. With those email addresses, you can actually just buy the data and compare it all. There's been one company that took me up on this, and we went and looked at Facebook data, a survey, and then we bought all the information on top of it. All three lined up perfectly. It all said that the audience was exactly the same. So it was a few months ago that I think really set me off on a rant on the beat. Marvel's Axel Alonso said that we don't know who reads comics. I'll call him bullshit. We do know. They have the data. They just don't know either how to get it or how to use it. I'm not really, I don't know. I'm a blogger and I'm able to pull up this for free in an hour a week.
Now, you know what, I'm gonna just jump in and go down this bullet point. But it's like when you noticed that Marvel had increased, and when I listen to Marvel executives talk, and Marvel's owned by Disney, obviously, and I've heard sometimes in an unguarded moment, they mention something about testing that they do. In fact, Dan Buckley, who's the publisher of Marvel, mentioned at one time that they had tested that kids might have their first exposure to superheroes as a Halloween costume. This is one of the most common ways that children have their first exposure to superheroes. So that told me that Disney, I used to work for Disney. They love surveys, marketing, they love testing. They do tons of it. And I suspect there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that Marvel and Disney actually have done some kind of readership surveys. I would be shocked to find out that this move towards female-centric comics, Ms. Marvel, Captain Marvel, and all the other books they're doing, I would be shocked to find out that there wasn't some kind of testing that had said, you know what, this is a sound direction to go in, to market. And like I said, I don't have any proof, but when you connect all the dots about what Brett is saying and knowing, how Marvel and Disney work, that's pretty strong evidence to me that's circumstantial there.
They want to make money. So if they're putting out books with She-Hulk, Elektra, Black Widow, it's up to 9, I think, at this point. They see something. They know something's there. They're not there to lose money. They want to, publish comics and be in the business. So if they're making this move, there's obviously something they see somewhere. The question is where. So anyone actually run stores, own a store? Anyone? No one? One. All right. So this is perfect for you. This is the easy way for you to find new customers. You just throw in a zip code, advertise it. Here's a coupon for a free back issue that I'm sure is in your 50-cent bin. And the best about that is it's measurable. All this is measurable. There's one thing that's always been drilled into me for a long time is what gets measured gets done. All these things are measurable. So, allows stores to find new customers. Tours, this is one that blows my mind. is there's no reason that DC, Marvel, any publisher shouldn't be looking at where the fans are and putting their creators on tours for specific areas. If there's a convention in that area and you're kind of on that breaking point of Batman going from mediocre to awesome, send Scott Snyder there. You know that through these numbers where these people exist, because you've all given us this data for free. Advertise is obviously the pretty basic one. Cross market, the thing that blows my mind, and all right, say is Skybound reached out at one point and was like, one, where'd you get this number? I think the actual quote was, where the F did you get this? So I had a long conversation with them, and I was like, find Facebook. And we had a long, talk, and it was actually a good talk about, what do you actually do with this? And I was like, you have the Walking Dead TV show, you have the Walking Dead video games, you have the Walking Dead comics. All those should be cross-marketed. If you actually go to the Marvel movies, every once in a while, it's about like one post a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, they'll mention a comic. But even smarter is like, why isn't there in the movies? DC did this once, and this is my favorite one, where at the end of Green Lantern, I don't know if on the DVDs there, one you'd have to go through and watch the Green Lantern.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, they actually had a URL. My favorite part of it was the URL didn't work. So it was like www.read.dccomics.com or something like that, and the URL was busted. So they had all this audience of however million people that went and saw the movie the opening weekend, and gave them a URL that didn't even work, but they at least tried. There's no reason, you go to a Marvel movie, you go to any of those movies that comics aren't mentioned. It's baffling that you don't see this. One, it helps grow the audience. There's a couple small publishers that have reached out, and I've been helping. They said, we want to get our comic out there. We have this very specific audience that we're going for. How do we do this? And they've had some mild success. To say this is cheap is an understatement. We're talking pennies a person if you do it right. When I saw the soft support, the hard support is that 24 million. It's a lot of people. So to anyone saying there's 300,000 people out there, there should be a lot more. Comics, 50,000 is a good sale. 100,000 people are ecstatic. All comics should be 100,000. There's 24 million people out there. Clearly, we're not talking to them. Build an email list. Is there creators here? Email is your number one thing. I'm going to stress this. I went and looked at the major publishers. Half of them ask for your email address. Most of them don't run newsletters. It's baffling, completely baffling that they don't take advantage. It's cost effective. It's the easiest way to talk. And God forbid that someone that is interested in a comic, you tell them when the comic is out. Obviously, you see who's purchasing. You can figure out with the advent of digital comics. It's easier than ever to figure that out, and not just are they purchasing. What are they purchasing? You can get down to the specific comic, what their reading habits are, how many pages they read. It kind of gets a little freaky and Big Brother-ish when it gets down to it, but I'm a data nerd, so I love this stuff. Are there differences in digital print? We know that there's differences in digital print. Comixology said, a couple months ago, 6 months ago, somewhere around there, that their largest demographic right now, growing demographic, is women 20 to 25, I think it was. Which was 20% of their growth during certain time periods. To see that in print would be awesome. But what fundamentally is their difference? Is it comic stores that women aren't going to for some reason? We'll get that to the next panel. Overall, we can expand the market. This is a good thing. We want comics to be around. And the final is test conventional wisdom. I think we've shown here that the thought that women don't exist. I see you in front of me. You're here. And most importantly, why is this important? Because it's shit like this. This is why it's important. Up in the left corner, there was a blow up about a rape room in a comic store, which made Jezebel. This actually went mainstream media. The Monera cover went mainstream media. So people who aren't into comics, because of crap over and over again, that it's a male-dominated thing, their exposure to comics is stuff like this. For video games, the Quinn and I can't pronounce her last name, Sarkeesian. Yeah. That hits mainstream media. People are introduced to video game and video gamers and game culture and comic culture for all this negative stuff. And it blows my mind that, women exist. We have to accept it. The folks that are kind of grasping on to just a non-reality, this myth of what's out there. So yeah, I think that's all of the things.
Yeah, and I mean, just, when Brett and I talked about this last year, it was exactly a year ago, I believe, at SPX, when he was telling me that he had all this information. And I was like, well, why doesn't anybody know this? And, he had been running it on his site, and
for like a year or two at that point.
And nobody had paid any attention to it. So I said, why don't you cross-post your stuff on my site, which does get more reach. And, I'm really thrilled. I'm so thrilled. There was one post in particular that he did where I gave it a really good headline that was like, study shows 44% of the female market. And I'm so awesome because anytime these stories that you just saw come up and they reference the actual readership, they link to that post on the beat. And, it's always like, but studies show that women are this. So, it's been in Time magazine, it was in The Guardian. It's been everywhere. I mean, I will send, whenever I see a link, I make sure Brett sees it, and, we just laugh, because this is, I mean, the reason I really wanted to show those older surveys, even one from 2011, where it was, in 2011, I mean, the results were released in 2012, 2 years ago, and if you walked around a show 2 years ago, I guarantee you saw a diverse audience, and yet, these numbers are being pushed that are trying to say, well, we don't know. We just don't, the numbers don't show it.
6 months ago they said we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I can't even imagine why Axel said that. I'm very puzzled because they must have some kind of, it doesn't make sense to me that they don't. But anyway, it's so important. I'm so glad, Brett, that you put that last slide in there, because, I wrote a post for my site that I called, Comics Are Hitting Puberty and It Isn't Pretty. And I mean, I really do think that there is, belief in this fandom that doesn't exist. And I think as the fandom as it really does exist is, making itself more known through Tumblr, through Twitter, through digital comics, through these new memes, these new channels. I do think there's some pushback against it, for the good old days, which I don't think were that good, I mean, I don't think it's that good when you have a industry and an art form that is so narrowly focused, and so, I think it's a really, really amazing that we have these numbers to be able to move forward as an industry and as a medium. So, anyway.
There's got to be some questions.
Yeah.
We'll go all the way in the back then.
Do you have similar breakdowns by age and what the gender is in different age groups?
Yeah, I actually do. It's on the site. I didn't put it up there just because I couldn't find that to compare to anything else. Age is interesting. It's what you'd expect, kind of like 20 to 30-ish is the two largest demographics, and it's about 20% for each of those. What's fascinating, though, is depending on what you look at, is those under 17. So I should also bring up, because it's online, you're not going to get accurate 13 and under. If you actually look at the Eventbrite, there's it says 0% for 13 and under. I don't know why they included it. So it's a little skewed in that. But the under 17, depending on what you look like, it gets really fascinating, especially for manga, that under 17, women are the majority of manga fans. And for anyone that's into manga, this isn't a shock. I mean, it's pretty clear, but you're nodding your head. There's no proof of that. We see it visually. Well, we have the numbers to show it. But yeah, it gets really kind of fascinating. It's also, I think, part of just how Facebook is. Once you get above 40-ish, 50-ish, things get a little weird. Women become a high percentage, but I think that has more to do with the fact that just women are on Facebook more at that age. So if you ever look at the stats, there's this point where it converges and women become the majority, and everyone's like, oh, there's no way. And I'm like, at that point, the system breaks down. So age, I'm not quite as keen on. Gender, I think it nails it. But yeah, I mean, it's also pretty consistent. The one thing, if I remember right, from between 2013, 2014, there was a huge drop in under 17. There was really, percentage-wise, it just tanked.
On Facebook?
Yeah.
That's because they were their parents are on it. And they were leaving Facebook.
And that's my guess, is that has more trends to do with that system than anything else. But it gets fascinating. Education-wise, comic fans, you should be very happy. You're way more educated than the average Facebook user. And I think I also Facebook has gender interest, which some people have been like, oh, gay, straight, bisexual, whatever, LGBTQ, whatever letters are on there now. But that comes out consistently like 5 to 6%. But that's like, what are you interested in? That one also I can't nail and say, hey, is this really what you're interested in? I'm trying to think what else I look at. And there's also marriage, like statuses, which gets kind of fun and interesting because they really expanded it. So like, people who are like in complicated relationships and open relationships and divorced and widowed and married and single and all that. What kind of gets fun at some point is the numbers start shifting between like divorced and then, or separated like 1 month, and then that might drop, but divorced goes up. I'm not saying that people move from one category to the other, but actually, I like really all this started as a joke. I was single at the time when Facebook launched this platform, and I made a crack. I was like, finally, I can actually meet women in my area who are into comics, and everyone was just like, of course, this is the first thing that you do with it. But yeah, I mean, the amount of data you can get it's fascinating. It's really frightening, and there's more ways to do this. So if you don't need to do just Facebook. You literally can buy the data. There's entire people whose entire job is to sell data, and it's like 10 cents a person. I'm not joking when I say to that, for like 200 points of data, which is kind of awesome in a freaky way. And basically, you can get everything but your social security number and your bank number, which is fun. Well, you were about me.
So do you think that DC has somehow like noticed what Marvel, the numbers in terms of Marvel, and now that's why they're putting out those upcoming books, those Batman titles, like Gotham Academy and Batgirl, those type of things. So they see.
Well, I think there have always been people. I mean, it's kind of famous that there have been all these pitches that were kind of like that, like there was this young Wonder Woman pitch that an artist put up, and everyone was like, oh, that's so cool, why don't they do it? And like there's been all these rejected pitches. So I think, yeah. I mean, I think the short answer is yeah. I mean, I think looking at the actual reality of who is buying and reading and interested in comics now, like the creators themselves want to do this kind of stuff. And, I was just at Target, and in the ladies' underwear was like, these panties for Spider-Man and Batman and everything, So, I mean, obviously there's an awareness. If women are going to wear underwear, there's some level of awareness about it. So, yeah, I think that they are catching on to the reality.
I also think the Gotham Academy specifically is a play off the Gotham TV show. Because to me that's geared towards young teen tweens, and that seems to be what the Gotham TV show might be. So I think that is DC finally clicking in those departments. I could be wrong, but on the outside, that's how I would interpret it. It's smart. It's what they should be doing. It took them a while, but it's a big giant juggernaut corporation. Things aren't nimble. Someone over here, yeah.
So I'm really curious about these, because I heard about the threats against Anita Sarkeesian and stuff. And, like, who are these guys? Like, it doesn't seem like you can't just assume that everyone in the group is going to be terrible, but who are they?
Yeah, I think that's a whole other panel.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's one here. It's one that I've wondered for a really long time, and she and I have debated about this one consistently. I couldn't tell you. I really couldn't tell you.
I mean, I think it just came out. There was this. Oh, actually, no, I can't tell that story. But sometimes it turns out that these are regular people who have a second life online, and I think it's kind of an artifact of how the internet began. I mean, I've been online for more than 20 years, which is a long time, and when I started, it did have this kind of weird Wild West nerd feel to it, and you were anonymous. That was the beauty of it, and I always kind of thought flame wars were what came with the internet. That you would be prepared to defend your answer, and I think there are a lot of eddies of the internet that still live by those rules, and but I think that is I think that needs to change. I mean, I think there's always going to be the idea that you could be an anonymous threat and go throw a bottle through a window, and we think that's wrong. And I think the same thing is that, you know, if that these harmful, hurtful, you know, incredibly insane, you know, doing that is wrong. It's wrong. And you know, on Facebook, I mean, it's funny that I just put up again a post about this, but on the rape room story, the store put up, and it was you know, it was a joke, but it was a really inappropriate, stupid joke. And the owner of the store put up a statement about this that explained, oh, it wasn't, you know, it's really kind of suspicious statement. And then I was fascinated by Facebook, because you are a real person on Facebook, and like even the comments there became this wildly divisive breakdown between, you know, he said, she said, and, you know, I stand with the store, I stand with the rape room, and, you know, or there was a lot of women who posted about it, said, you know, owner, I know you want to have a good business, really you should look at what your customers are saying here and really take this as a wake-up call that maybe your store isn't run as welcomingly as it should be. You know, and I mean, I've been involved with this for a long time as a woman in comics who was told she didn't exist, and who, you know, with the things that I was interested in when I was a kid, I mean, there was very few women were interested in these nerdy things, and so I became involved in I co-founded an organization called Friends of Lulu, where we were trying to prove that there were women reading comics. We did a survey. Our results, I wish I still had those, actually. That would be very interesting to look at. This is from the 90s. And, you know, we tried to get retailers to be more open to selling different kinds of material. We were, you know, we put out a handbook where we said things like, maybe if you put The Simpsons in your window instead of Batman, this, you know, you might draw people who like The Simpsons. And this got incredible pushback. I mean, it was not an idea that everybody embraced readily. And I mean, I think part of it was believing that there wasn't a diverse audience. So, you know, that's why I you know, I think, you know, that having just having these concrete numbers that suggest that there's a difference is so important, you know, because now, yeah.
I mean, there was also, what you push was a big deal. I mean, there was one I did where I was like, I wonder who actually is interested in the female characters. And again, it was like, I think I scoured Wikipedia and pulled every female comic book character I could find and threw it into this, and it was hundreds of characters. It was anything from like Red Sonja, which, you know, we can argue about comic characters, to like She-Hulk. And found 62% of women this was the percentage that enjoyed female characters. So I mean, it's, what everyone reads is different too. And I think that's important to recognize, is not just a one-size-fits-all, you know.
Should you get into genre right now?
Genre's a little bit more difficult to do, other than indie and mainstream, but genre's it's harder. Genre, interesting enough, the one area you can do genre is manga. People love to tell you if they're into like hentai and some of the weirder stuff. I don't know why, but that seems to be okay. But I feel like superheroes, no, that not at all. But it's okay to like Batman. Genre, I've been asked a lot. It's really hard to do. We'll go over here and then we'll come back. So,
Mike, you had actually just hit on it briefly, but what's the disconnect in the numbers being out there? And I don't want to say all publishers, but specifically Marvel and DC, because they do get singled out a bit. Why are they not as receptive to that information being there? And I know you guys aren't the ones that ask this question, it's really for them, but what's your perception of it? Why are they sort of still sitting on the fact that it's the average?
Well,
40-year-old man.
Well, I'll tell you why, and you know, Marvel and DC both are part of larger entertainment conglomerates, okay? And I think, for instance, Disney and Marvel is very interesting, because Disney is the world's most successful entertainment company, and they have the world's biggest girls property, Disney Princesses, which is actually, I think, the biggest licensed property there is. I mean, it's absolutely massive. Winnie the Pooh might be bigger, it varies, but Princesses is massive, massive. So Disney does fine reaching girls. They have no problems with that. But they purposely bought Marvel for $4 billion, and then they bought Lucasfilm because they wanted to reach the male audience. So they felt that superheroes were the way to do it. So I think initially, I think there was some idea that this is for boys, and that, you know, when you allow girls into the boys' clubhouse, boys don't think it's as cool. So, you know, again, there is a panel on gender and comics later on. I urge you all to come to that, where we'll discuss more of this kind of thing. So I think in some ways it was being kept, as I joke, a safe space for boys. Okay? And I think since then that they've actually realized, I mean, Marvel's, you know, their movies reach, again, all 4 quadrants. You know, 4 quadrants are young women, young men, older women, older men, you know, the 4 quadrants. And Marvel movies appeal to all of them. So I think Disney and Marvel kind of realized that they have a wide audience, and shutting any of it down would be stupid. You know, I mean, it's the same thing with Star Wars. Obviously, that has a wide demographic appeal. I mean, with DC, I think it's kind of the same thing. I think that they think that their superheroes are their boys' line, and they want to keep it for boys. And I mean, I'm sympathetic to that. I do, you know, I mean, there are things that boys like more, or girls like more. I mean, that's, you know, that's not a dispute. I mean, so, but, you know, we're saying as a general category, comics are not one of those things. So I think they've been trying, this is just my guess. I worked for Disney and I worked for DC, so, you know, about a while ago. But I think my guess is that they want to keep it that boy-focused entertainment, because girls, once they get into things, they really go hog wild for it, you know? And, but I don't think it's effective. I don't think there's a reason for that. I think you could have your Ms. Marvel, let's say, which is, you know, the Marvel book that has a very high female readership, or your Captain Marvel, you know, with the Carol Corps. And maybe you have the Punisher. I mean, I know women love the Punisher. I'm not saying don't like the Punisher, but I'm saying maybe this is a book that is more appealing to this audience. You know, you can diversify within the line. So I think they're getting wiser to that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to keep in mind in Disney, when they did their stock reports, when they bought Lucasfilm and they bought Marvel, they specifically said we bought this to shore up our boys line.
And they tried it before with the Ninja Turtle, not the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. They've been trying and trying and trying to get a boys property for a long time.
So they have a focus, and as a corporation, I can't blame them. Like, this is what they bought it for. You want your money back. So I know you were for a while, but
as you know, many creators are barely making a living doing this. How do we use this data, especially for indie creators, to expand our audiences? And I feel like if creators are going to expand, they need to reach out beyond people who read comic books already.
Yeah.
So how can we use this data? Do you have any suggestions on how to do that?
So there was one that reached out to me, and they had a comic about a musician, and then they had tied in music and stuff like that, and they were like, well, how do we do this? So I said, great, your audience, you know your audience. It's going to be, first and foremost, comic fans that are into music. So that's what they focused on. And they said, and they ran really cheap. I mean, we're talking pennies a day type of thing. It really doesn't have to be expensive. $1 a day goes really far. For the advertising.
On Facebook.
On
Facebook.
Yeah, for the advertising, $1 a day goes super far. And they went and focused. And they first went to those musicians and said, hey, come to our site and check this out, first issue free. For the comic musician demographic. And it went well. Like, they've got people signing up. They got people who went in and checked it all out. Then they did like a general push, and it tanked. So they clearly had a very niche audience. So basically, go after that audience.
Were they selling digital or print?
Digital. And theirs was simple, like, go to the site and download it for free. Digital, I think, when it comes to at least indie, is the savior. I mean, it costs you nothing, or very little, to have people go to your site and check out your first issue for free. Or check out the stuff for free.
And you know, just to answer that, I mean, I think this is, you know, it is a great tool for marketing, and marketing is so important. I do think it's a very competitive space right now, you know, for comics, and there's a lot of amazing material out there. So, you know, I mean, I would just say, as an ex-comic book editor, you kind of have to really make sure you got your A game going too, you know, because then you've got to look at what you're competing against. You know, how do you stand out against that also? So.
And And the big thing I'll also say is capture email addresses. When they first launched it, they were just giving the book away, like click this link and download it. I'm like, no, you should get something off of it, because that email address is, you know, when your second issue comes out, you're hitting them up saying, you read the first one for free, come check out the second one. And, you know, you'll have some success, you'll have some failure off of that, but it costs you very little to do. All the way back.
I have a question for you. Where do, when you take the demographic between male and female, and like you were saying earlier with the 62% of female characters, what percentage of those female characters are written by men or women? Have you ever looked into those numbers?
No, that would be fascinating to you, though.
Yes, that's
I'm guessing a lot are written by men.
Well, that's the thing. Are the ones written by men more prevalent than women, or the ones written by women more prevalent than women?
That'd be a really interesting one.
Yeah.
All right, that's
But
challenge.
I think there are, you know, we have a lot of assumptions about this or that, and you know, as someone who's been fighting for female creators also for quite a long time, I mean, there is kind of a female character ghetto. I mean, you know, I don't want to say, like, look, I want Gail Simone to write Red Sonja. That's awesome. You know, she should be writing Red Sonja. But, you know, let her write, I mean, she has written other characters, but it shouldn't always be a female and a female and a male and a male. I mean, you know, mix it up. Because I think there's more, you know, that's what this is all about. This is about finding out new things and wonderful stories, you know? So I think everybody should be given a chance to do things. And you know, just to kind of mention, you know, the Manara Spider-Woman cover controversy, you know, and I saw that, at first I was like, you know, I mean, I'm old and jaded, so I did not realize that this was going to catch fire. I did not realize that ass was on fire. And, you know, and I think it did because of what we're talking about here. I think it's because there is a real change going on. And it was so obvious that this was bad marketing that people were like, why did you do something so stupid? And then it became about all these other things that, you know, became very, very negative and you know, brought out all these you know, trolls and bad drawing Manara, I mean, questionable things. But I think bad drawing. Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I should do my Manara ass gallery, but you know, I mean, there's a real tension going on right now because of these things. And I don't think it has to be so confrontational. I think it should be, I think we really should be, like, if you love comics, as I do, and you know, I've devoted my life to comics, and I'm just so excited that we have this industry now, this art form that's so full of amazing, amazing, amazing books, and, you know, wonderful, passionate fans, and more new people coming in, being welcomed. You know, and so I think for both sides of it, both sides of these arguments, you know, it's more like, come on, let's just try to find the common ground and celebrate this and grow this so everybody can make more money at it. You know, I mean, that's really what this is about, and it, you know, is expanding it in every way. But I do understand also the outrage sells. I did a search between Miley Cyrus at the VMAs last year and Beyonce this year. You know, last year Miley Cyrus is twerking with a married man, oh my God, horrible racial tropes, and like mentions on Google search just like bam, off the charts. And you know, Beyonce comes out, she's a wife, she's a mother, she's a feminist, 16 minutes, like amazing, getting out there, proving how awesome she is. Like everybody's like, she's great. You know, and hers is like a little gentle bump, and no one remembers it. So that's a little discouraging.
Yeah, I'll already say the 4 top posts on my site are all controversial and all this type of crap.
Yeah.
Like the demographic stuff gets like no hits. No one cares. The positive stuff, no one cares.
Yeah. Yeah. Good news does not sell.
Yes.
I had a question going back to the very first slide you had. And something you said about the data from the 50s, I think. In that first DC survey, they did talk about genres, and, or at least, I don't know if that's what they considered it at the time, but, and one of the things I think they said there, if my eyes are any good, was the second thing is romance. And knowing what I know of comic history, after the Congressional
Yeah. And I mean, there is another slide. All these things I should have put in there. There's John Jackson Miller, who does awesome sales data analysis. He did an analysis of Archie Comics and their newsstand sales using their magazine audit and trust file, right? So, and it literally, I mean, I'll do it for the audience here from, backwards to me. So it's like, it goes like this, and it's high, and then it's like in the 70s, it literally goes like that, okay? And that is as the newsstand died. In the 70s and the 80s, and the direct sales comic shop market began. And that slide alone shows what happened to romance and what happened to these other genres. Like, I mean, again, people have this narrative about, oh, comics were always for boys. It's like, no, even Carmen Infantino.
Billy the Model.
Yeah, well, I mean, people will ignore, this is why intelligent people, like everyone in this room, have to, make sure that you understand what the actual facts from the past show, and not what people project from the past shows. So I absolutely, those other genres, yes, in the 50s there were all these genres for comics, and they sold 1 million copies, Dell Comics would sell 1 million copies on the newsstands. So there was a much larger audience. There also weren't video games, there wasn't as much TV, there was a lot less media, there wasn't the internet.
Sure, well, and you just said that, or your presumption was that the newsstand died in the 70s, and that's why it dropped off. I'm also wondering, did the women's liberation movement take away from interest in romance?
Well, that's possible. I mean, I think it's very interesting to me. Again, like I grew up in a house where my mother was a cartoonist and my grandmother bought me comic books, so I didn't have any kind of disconnect in my personal household. But I would say that generally in my life, as I grew up and talked to other women, there was probably less interest in anything nerdy among a certain, I'll call it for, easy demographics. Let's call it the Sex and the City cohort, okay? There's probably less interest in nerdy things among that, okay? But now you have the sequel to Sex and the City, Girls, and Lena Dunham is very open. She likes comics. She's going to write an Archie comic, So even this, because nerd culture has become so widespread, there is no divide anymore. And even Lena Dunham, I guarantee, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, would not have been into comics at all, But now, because of the internet proving that people like things, now she's moved into that. Whoopi Goldberg is the other example, on The View. I mean, they go do comic stories on The View, and Whoopi Goldberg's always been a comics fan. She's never hidden it, And so again, you have all these different quadrants. So, I mean, it is. It's been a tough push to get adult women to read comics. But I think what you see now is a lot of these manga. I came to Otakon the first time a decade ago. They're married now, they have kids, and they're pushing them in their strollers and their costumes. These kids are going to be raised in nerd-friendly comics reading households. And, just to, wrap it up a little bit, I mean, kids' comics are the fastest growing genre. Sales are, the best-selling comics are all kids' comics. In the book world, is Wimpy Kid a comic? All right, variable, but, this sold like 2 million copies. It's growing very fast. There's really good comics for kids now. They're readily available. And when you see these young comics readers growing up, getting into the next thing, that's when you're going to see those actual sales. As Brett says, there's 24 million audience, and yet, if you sell 50,000 copies, you're like, wow, that's so great. So I think to see that number, that baseline grow, I think when these kids grow up, I think in the next decade, we're going to see some really interesting changes.
I also think the interesting is, I'm a firm believer the comic market tanked once the newsstand went away. I also find it fascinating that it started increasing when the internet started blowing up and broadband became readily available, which is now the newsstand. Looking at those two things, I think, well, one, there's a thesis there, but it'll get interesting as we get more connected. I expect some good things too, especially as creators reach out to the audience and find their audience. It's easier to market and get the word out. Anything else? Yes?
You guys have any numbers on how different racial communities, such as, Black people, have in comics? Because
Data-wise, I can't get it as easily. Facebook, out of everything, has one like, is there a Hispanic connection? And I have no idea what the hell they count as far as that, so I've stayed away from it. But online, colorblind, not really. But when it comes to data, it is. I haven't noticed it. I think I could probably buy the data if I wanted to. But it's on one. I really don't know. I have no idea.
And I think that actually is the next frontier. I mean, I think the female cohort is. I think that all these things taken together. I think everyone admits that women like comics now. I do think the getting more diversity from a racial standpoint or an ethnic that standpoint. I think that's a big battle that's next to be fought. And I think getting editorial and publishers to really be more aware of this, because there's always been a very mixed audience that read these, always. I mean, I went to Comic-Cons when I was a kid, and it's all the same thing. It's like, look around you, who is reading these books, So I think that's a real battle yet to come, and I would be, I think we're unfortunately we're going to kind of continue to see like things and more. It has to be kind of the outrage wedge to get in there. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful about that.
There's actually a really good speech by Jean Yang that he gave at the National Book Festival last weekend. It's on, should be able to easily find it online. Watch it. It's fascinating. And if you get a chance to see him present. What's that? Jean Yang?
Yeah, Jean Yang.
Yeah.
Y-A-N-G. And he talks about the need for diversity, and I don't think there's any question that we need to have that.
I think we have time for one more, maybe. Yep, we got time for one more.
I'm curious. I heard that a long time ago, like Gold Key would reprint comics every 4 years because they felt like readers would stop reading in 4 years, and so they could just reprint everything for a new group. Do we know what, as people, maybe as they start reading younger, like what the attrition is, or like boomeranging back to it as other interests become important and then coming back to the story? Do we know what that kind of continuation is?
It's interesting. So the age it peaks really early, like that 2030, then drops off a hell of a lot once you get to the 40s. I don't really know. I know digital is helping bring back people. Comicsology, I think, has admitted that a lot of their audience are people who have fallen off and are rediscovering comics. The cycle, I have no idea. I really don't know. There's marketers who definitely will answer that one better than I.
I just want to comment on that. And if you take all those 70s comics and 70s comics and 60s comics, those are all very kid-friendly. You could just reprint those for not paying any creators.
Yeah, right.
And then just, make a ton of money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is, like what creators want to get out of it, and what they put into it, and what they expect, and the royalty system has changed comics, the economics of comics. The cost of the books went up because of that, and there's all these other things that go hand in hand with it. But I feel overall, I feel very, very, very positive. I feel, I've worked my whole life in comics, and this is where I wanted to see it. This is what I believed in from the get-go, right when I started out, and I just want to do more and more to make sure that continues. So,
Cool.
Well, you guys are awesome, by the way. Really great questions. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for coming.